agriculture, today's topic is very close to my heart, agriculture, because agriculture is one industry which is very different from other sectors, other manufacturing sectors, because agriculture is a seasonal activity. It is dependent on nature. It has a long gestation period. The demand, the supply cannot exist very quickly to the demand because of the long gestation period. And the policies are also very dynamic, because some year we have very huge production, some year we have shortfall. So the policies also keep on changing. So amidst this, I would like to first invite my director, Professor Jyoti Chandiramani. Professor Jyoti Chandiramani has done her master's in economics from Mumbai University and a PhD from Pune University. She is also our director, I think she's almost 10 years. So, Professor Jyoti Chandiramani, ma'am, I would like you to give your opening and the welcome remarks.
A very good afternoon to everyone on this particular platform. On behalf of Symbiosis School of Economics, I welcome you on this webinar, the backdrop is the pandemic, and therefore we are looking at situations before COVID, during COVID, and then after COVID. So we call it BC, C, and then in due course of time, maybe after COVID, so AC. Tough times always lead to innovation, lead to a lot of changes. And this is a series of discussions that we are going to be having from the School of Economics. The next one is going to be on medium, small, and micro, small, and medium enterprises. Then we are going to go into the future of urban, etc. So there are going to be series of such sessions that are going to be organized with Indian economy in our backdrop. When this pandemic happened, and I remember from 16th of March, there was this discussion happening in Pune from where we are. The first case was in 9th of March in Pune. Our basic requirement everywhere was to ensure that we have our day-to-day necessities in place. So we were running to get all our groceries. So it could have been our cereals, it could have been our pulses. We initially overstocked on vegetables from a micro point of view. Then we realized even vegetables in a refrigerator has a shelf life. I'm talking about it from a gated community that I've been living in which I've shared these experiences with everyone. All of us were very concerned about our cereals, spices, our oils, horticulture, vegetables, fruit, and never has it been easier for a person. Like in these COVID tough times, we got grapes from Nasik, straight from the farm to the table. We got muskmelon and watermelon and corn, etc. And at times I wondered, is this what the COVID is really, working out for us in Pune district, in the city, in Kalyani Nagar, where I live? And then I thought about the days where I, was in Mumbai and lived in South Mumbai. And the moment there was a Bandh, because you were at the other end of Mumbai, which was very close to the sea, other than the sea water, you never got anything else. So it also depends upon your geographical location. So coming to that, many of us look at how are we prepared with the kind of food grain supply that we have, that we need. When this pandemic broke out, the Rabi crop was almost done. So its real impact will be felt really on the Kharif crop, which will come in now, because it was in this period from March to June, and what we are going to see in the near future. So that's something, Sangeeta, I'd like you to share light on in terms of what you feel is going to be its impact on the output in the Kharif season, and what was the problem in the Rabi season. Yes, we know that there were two other factors. The labor going out, people that were migrating, how they left. And then there was another part where there was reverse migration where labor was coming in. So, in terms of how this COVID is going to really work out for the agricultural sector, which contributes nearly 15% approximately for the gross value added, compared to globally where it is around 6.4%. What is its impact going to be on output, on productivity, on the pricing? on the logistics, on the labor market, labor associated with agriculture, and are we going to be Atmanirbhar Bharat? Because we are now working towards Atmanirbhar household, where every house has its own share of, food that they need. In terms of that, we look at employability. Some of us have our jobs. So many people have lost their jobs. Many people have had a salary cut. But we know that the figures are sounding better for the month of June, the data from CMI that is out. So looking at this, let's not spend more time and hear the expert for today, Dr. Sangeeta Shroff, share her thoughts with us on COVID and its impact on agriculture, opportunities for future, and maybe how we can get completely self-sufficient in this regard. Thank you. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. You're audible. Yeah. You're audible, ma'am.
Good afternoon. And as I mentioned, my topic is COVID-19 pandemic and agriculture, opportunities ahead. Of course, I've made a small backdrop, which is not required because everybody knows that the novel coronavirus outbreak was reported in Wuhan, China in December 2019. And this virus is so contagious that within a few months, the global nature of the pandemic was there, and countries were forced to declare a lockdown. The first lockdown was declared in India on 24th March 2020, and we are followed by 5 lockdowns. And today we are in 5th lockdown and unlock 1. So what was the economy? Obviously, once the lockdown was declared, the lockdown paralyzed the economy. Already the GDP growth was very negative, very pessimistic, and this pandemic is going to make it worse. So we are projecting a further decline in GDP growth rate, high unemployment, and there's been reverse migration of labor. So, but immediately after the government declared the lockdown, some essential services were obviously exempt from the lockdown, and there were certain guidelines. So essential services such as agriculture was in the exempt category. So what was exempted? Basically, farming operations, agro-produce marketing and its movement, procurement at minimum support prices, harvesting, provision of inputs and logistics, sowing of crops. Because obviously agriculture is one of the essential services and it had to be exempt from the lockdown, and it had to continue with the sector. So what was the sudden impact of the COVID-19 lockdown? Jyoti already mentioned in her introductory remarks that there was immediate reaction, was panic-induced stockpiling of essentials, which caused shortages and hence rise in prices, because people didn't know. They thought, what does lockdown mean? And they immediately started piling up their stocks at home. And this led to a sudden sharp rise in prices. The prices of pulses were something like 160, 180 rupees kg. They were in short stocks. There were pictures of malls showing all empty shelves. So that was the immediate reaction. And the supplies began to reach urban consumers gradually, but generally the farmers did suffer some initial hardships. So what were the problems faced by the farmers? Severe. So what were the problems faced by the farmers? Obviously, there was severe shortage of labor due to fear, because a lot of fear for the labor to go and work in the fields or for any other operations, because they thought they might contact the virus. And also there was need for social distancing. So a particular employer, like say for packaging or grading or whatever, if they wanted 5 workers, they kept 2. So there was a lot of severe shortage of labor. There were transport bottlenecks. There was lack of adequate storage facilities, poor infrastructure in terms of pre-cooling chambers, cold storage, and other post-harvest facilities. Now, many of these logistics, like I talked about pre-cooling, cold storage, they are chronic shortages in agriculture. It's not that it's happened because of COVID. It's only due to COVID. The need was more. So since the need was more, the shortage was felt more. But these are actually chronic shortages in Indian agriculture, all our logistics support. Then I go to agriculture and the allied sector. There were various bottlenecks which led to huge losses in the agriculture and allied sector. Now, when I talk about agriculture, probably in this presentation, I'll do a lot of micro focus on the horticulture and allied sector, because they were severely impacted because they are highly perishable. Whereas agriculture, like when we talk about food grains or cereals like rice, wheat, pulses, or oilseeds, they are not so perishable, whereas horticulture and allied sector are highly perishable. So therefore, there was more problem with respect to storage and transport of these commodities. The food grains have a longer shelf life and procured under minimum support price, and hence farmers could salvage the situation. The Rabi wheat was harvested, facilitated by mechanization, and there was sowing of summer crops has already taken place, and now actually in June we sow the Kharif crops. So the farmers are beginning to sow the Kharif crops now, but the summer crops have been sown despite the lockdown conditions. So as I said, I'm going to focus more on the horticulture sector, because the horticulture sector, we get more of fruits and vegetables which are highly perishable, and many of the horticultural crops, they coincide with the summer season, and it was peak time for their harvest, and therefore they suffered the maximum. So horticultural sector is considered to be a high value crop. While horticultural crops occupy 8% of area, they contribute to 26% of value of output from agriculture. We have food grains which occupy about 50% of our gross cropped area, but they contribute around 25-26%. And here we have horticulture which has only 8% area, but it gives you 26% of the value of output from agriculture. Then farmers cultivate these horticultural crops in the hope of earning reasonably high returns, and hence invest in these crops. And the produce is also exported. Now, what are the losses in the horticulture sector due to COVID-19? As we already know that there was shortage of laborers, the farmers could not easily harvest the produce. Even if the crop was harvested, there was difficulty in transporting the produce. The contractors were reluctant to purchase. Supplies were choked up in the fields, leading to crash in farm gate prices. The farmers could not even recover their cost of production. And obviously they would not be able to repay the loans, because very often the farmers take big loans for growing grapes and many horticultural crops. And obviously this year they could not recover even their cost of production. And that is going to give problem in repaying their loans and not even being able to cover their cost of production. So what I've done is that I have just done some, there's no data as such. Normally we do our research with the help of field survey and contacting several stakeholders. This time all those limitations were there. Nevertheless, I had some contacts of traders, farmers, and other data I looked into, AgroOne and other sources. And I just did some very rough estimates to try and find out what could have been the losses, as I mentioned, mainly with respect to horticulture, and which is highly perishable. And I tried to do some calculations. So I begin with some horticultural crops where I try to calculate what could have been losses in some of the major fruits, which are the peak summer fruits and ready to harvest when the lockdown was announced. So I begin with watermelon, which has a huge demand in summer, and it was just ready for harvest when the lockdown was announced. While a farmer normally earns about 4.5 lakh per hectare by cultivating watermelons, in 2020 season, that is due to the COVID lockdown, he earned just 80,000 per hectare. So where is 4.5 lakh and where is 80,000 per hectare? This difference was the loss in his expected earnings. Loss to watermelon economy. So then I looked at this difference in the earnings and I tried to multiply it by the area which is under watermelons. And I found that this loss in the earnings was approximately 3,000 crore. So for a small crop like watermelon, which has hardly 50,000 hectares under cultivation, the loss has been as much as 3,000 crores. And there are pictures, like I had friends in Sangli and other places where they send me photos of ladies sitting outside on the road and selling watermelons at 3 rupees and 7 rupees per kg. So it's been a huge loss for watermelons. And in many, in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, I'm told that they did not even harvest the crop because the cost of harvest, they didn't have labor and the cost was so high. So a lot of watermelon and a lot of horticultural crops just went as fodder. They were not harvested at all. With respect to muskmelon, as Dr. Jyoti mentioned, we enjoy it in summer and she got it in her society. Many were lucky to get watermelon and melon, but the farmers did face losses. While the expected price was rupees 35 per kg, the farmers received rupees 15 per kg, and the total loss was rupees 2,500 crore with respect to watermelon, with respect to melon. Now with respect to the grapes, the grape crop starts early, January, February. So a lot of the grapes were already harvested and sold, and only about 30% of the crop was still on the field. But for this, because farmers want to make money in April, May, the prices gradually start increasing. So they try to even out the harvest season, January, February, March, April, they try to even it out. So most of it was done, but 30% of the crop was still on the field, and the prices crashed, say from something like 110 rupee per kg to rupees 40 per kg or even less. And a lot of the export consignments were not complete. We export a lot of grapes, but some of them were not complete. And so there was a loss to the grape sector for about 5,000 crores. And as I mentioned that the prices of grapes crashed, I've said something to 40 rupees per kg, but some of the farmers said that the price even went to 10 rupee and 15 rupees per kg. And so they preferred not to sell the grapes, but to use them as raisins, to cut for agro-processing into raisins. They thought they may fetch a better price in the future. Then strawberry is another soft crop grown. I mean, many of us rush to Mahabaleshwar during summer to enjoy the strawberry season. Highly perishable, cultivated in the western belt of Maharashtra in about 4,000 acres. The peak sales of this crop are mainly in April and May. But again, the lockdown was announced suddenly in March. So a lot of stocks piled up due to lockdown and the prices crashed by about 40%. So there are many local buyers, big buyers, agro-processors like Mapro, Mala, who purchased but they have limitations. I spoke to some of the traders in Mapro and some of the stakeholders. They said that we have limited stocking capacity. In fact, they wanted to have more and more cold chains. The process, the file is with the bureaucracy to get clearance. It's not had, but whatever limited stocking capacity they had stocked, they produce. They could not buy any further. So, and the outside traders could not enter the market due to lockdown. And secondly, a lot of strawberries transported to Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai. This could not happen. So the produce was piled up in the Mahabaleshwar Panchgani Y belt, and this led to crash in prices. And some parts, the crop was not at all harvested. Plus, besides that, there was no value addition, because we know strawberries have a lot of value addition. This could not happen. And the local purchasers had already exhausted their stocking capacity. So that was with respect to the strawberry crop. With respect to mango, the king of fruits, it occupies 35% area under fruit crops. The farmers initially, when the crop came into the market, they did suffer a loss of income as the prices crashed by 20 to 40%. And we know that India is a big exporter of mango, especially our Maharashtra Alfonso mangoes. So we normally export a lot of mangoes to USA, Europe. I don't know if Dr. Deshpande sitting in USA got the Alfonso mangoes to eat. I'm sure he missed them this year. But we could not export. Only some consignments went to Gulf by ship, but mango exporters suffered a setback. And then several processing factories were not operating, and hence considerable wastage of second-grade fruit. But what has happened is that this happened in the beginning of the season, but gradually the marketing became more aggressive. The marketing boards in different states, especially for Maharashtra, the Maharashtra State Agriculture Marketing Board, they made considerable efforts to smoothen the supply chain, which greatly eased the situation. Also, a number of aggregators, they collected the demand from various housing societies, and bulk orders were supplied to them through farmers. So even Jyoti mentioned this point, that sitting in housing societies, many fruits were available to the consumers in urban areas. Then floriculture was a big disaster. There was a demand shock in the domestic as well as export market. In the export market, the loss was estimated at rupees 150 crore. In the domestic market, the loss was estimated to be something like 10 lakh per day. The biggest loss was with respect to marigolds. They were totally destroyed. The flowers were uprooted, they were not harvested, and there was no demand, because we know April, May, it's wedding season, festivals, and so many other reasons why the flowers are in demand. There were no exports, so the floriculture was at a total disaster. Then we come to the allied sector, that is the meat, fish, and eggs. The monthly loss to the fisheries sector was estimated at 7,000 crore. 4,000 crore was lost in export of fish. We export a lot of buffalo meat, but that did not happen this year due to COVID. And as you all may have seen in the media, that there were false rumors in February and March. Starting from February itself, there were false rumors that poultry birds are the vectors of coronavirus. So there was a fall in demand, huge fall in demand, and a glut in supply. the poultry birds were sold at rupees 10 to rupees 30 per kg, while the cost of production is something like 80 rupees per kg. Eggs were sold at half the price. The cost of producing an egg is 4 rupees, but it was sold at rupees 2. Many chicken farms were destroyed, and loss to the poultry industry between February to April 2020 was estimated at 22,500 crores. This is the Poultry Dealers Association, which has said that there was a huge loss to the poultry industry. Then coming to dairy. So immediate impact was decline in price of milk by about 30%. Obviously, there's a fall in demand for milk because the hotels are closed. We have a large number of tea stalls. We see in every nook and corner there are tea stalls which demand milk. They were closed. And also there is low value addition because sweet shops were closed. So low demand in milk. But with respect to milk, the government was quick to intervene and directed that the cooperatives must procure the milk. And this brought about some kind of a stability to the milk sector. So the milk was converted into skimmed milk powder for future consumption and export. So therefore, since there was government intervention, milk was procured and converted into milk powder. The milk economy had some kind of a stability. So what have been the kind of lessons that we have learned and some of the issues which have emerged from some of the points which I raised in my previous slides? The farm gate prices crashed. There were huge wastages. The supply chain was fragmented. Poor infrastructure in the form of adequate cold storage and other logistics. For example, apples were arriving from Kashmir to Delhi, but they had no buyers because there was a lot of fear also for people to buy initially. And the cold storages were not available to store the apples. Large number of stocks went rotten. Similar was the case with strawberries, as I mentioned before. So, but with respect to labor shortage for farming and other operations, mechanization did provide some salvage to the situation. And there was custom hiring of all mechanical equipments. And then even there was agro-processing of some important agricultural produce. And agriculture, the lessons to learn is that we need mechanization and agro-processing in such kind of exigencies to handle the situation. So what are the opportunities with this in this COVID-like situation? What we need to do is basic issue was that the supply chain was fragmented, and we need to strengthen our supply chain and make it more agile. So there are a large number of farmer producer companies. The government has been promoting a lot of farmer producers companies. We have more than 7,000 odd, I was just reading today. Some are successful, some are not. But in this presentation, I'm giving an example of a very successful farmer producer company who has actually helped to bridge the gap between the rural farmers and the urban consumers. So a prominent example is that of Sayadri Farms based in Nasik. They have a membership of more than 8,000 farmers, mostly small and marginal. So what did they do? They tapped the urban consumers through e-commerce, social media, mobile apps, and websites. They were also in touch with all the farmers, so they were aware of the amount of produce that is available, and they could judge the stocks available with the farmers. There was total coordination with all the stakeholders, and they could, with proper grading and packaging, they could supply produce to 57,000 urban consumers located in Pune, Bombay, and neighboring urban cities with minimum contact and maintaining social distancing. And the customers paid online payment. So finally, they could achieve economies of scale through an efficient supply chain, and the transaction costs were also reduced. So with this kind of a efficient supply chain, there was a benefit both to the producer and the consumer, and the supply-demand asymmetry could be resolved. And then the Sayadri farm is also going into backward and forward linkage. They have leveraged themselves in the total value chain. They provide back-end support to farmers through advisory service, supply of inputs. Then they undertake agro-processing activities such as tomato ketchup. For many, like they undertake supply tomato puree to say Kisan. And actually tomato is the prices fluctuate of tomatoes as much as they fluctuate with onions. Onion is a politically sensitive crop, so it hits the headlines in the media. Tomato is equally creates a lot of losses for the farmers. Many of you may have seen tomatoes being thrown on the highways. Farmers sometimes don't harvest them because they go to 2 rupees and 3 rupees a kg. They are equally, and in fact, tomato, onion, and potato, they are coined as top. And these are very sensitive crops where a lot of losses are made. And therefore, agro-processing of these crops can really help to create lean season demand and prevent wastages. And then Sahyadri is also a leading exporter of grapes. They have about 17% market share, and they also export other horticultural crops. So I've just given an example of farmer-producer organizations that when many such come into the picture, they would help to build an efficient supply chain, both backward linkage and forward linkage. And this will definitely help the farmers to get a better price, reduce unnecessary costs, reduce transaction costs, and give a fair deal to the farmer as well as the consumer. Then another point I'd like to stress upon is that there is a need for self-sufficiency. Now in COVID-like situations, we cannot get the comfort of globalization. Because there is a need for self-sufficiency, especially for important crops. Now talking about India, we are importing about 60% of edible requirements. We import a lot of edible oil from Malaysia, Indonesia. They are very nearby countries and they have a comparative cost advantage. India can import it very cheaply from these countries, and we've been doing it. As I mentioned, 60% of edible oil is imported from these countries to India. And in India also the per capita incomes are increasing. If you look at the data on per capita consumption, you find that from cereals and pulses, from cereals it's shifting to edible oil and pulses. So the demand with increases in per capita income, our demand for edible oils and pulses are increasing. But in India, we are not self-sufficient in these two commodities. In the last few years, there have been several occasions when the prices of pulses have reached 160, 170, very high prices. But then the government has taken the government is not complacent. The government has taken a lot of effort to see that we increase the production of pulses. But the fact is that we have increased the production of pulses by increasing area, not by increasing productivity. We need to increase the productivity of edible oil pulses so we become self-sufficient, because if these kind of stress situations come up, then we'll obviously face shortage and there'll be price rise. And as we all know, edible oil and pulses are very important, but India is a big importer of these commodities. So what we need to do is that we ought to increase the productivity levels and become self-sufficient. Now, what I've done is talking about increasing productivity levels. I've just shown in this bar chart what is the world productivity of some of the major crops like rice, maize, pulses, tur, oilseeds, groundnut, and what is India's productivity. And secondly, besides comparing India with the world highest, with the world average, I've also compared India within India intra-states, because within India also we have some states which have very high productivity and some which are very low. For example, if you take sugarcane, then Tamil Nadu has a very high productivity of sugarcane, whereas Maharashtra has a very low productivity. So we need to try to tap this potential and try to increase the productivity. So if you look at the world comparison, you find like the red line shows the world average and India is far below the world average. So we do have a potential to try to increase, like I talked about pulses in my presentation. In India, the average yield is 646 kg per hectare, whereas the world average is 829 and Kenya is showing something like 1600 kg. So the world average is almost double of India, and we do have a lot of potential to increase the productivity of many crops, and we should do that. Okay, so what are the challenges which we are facing us? There is a huge potential to increase productivity levels through technology. By technology, when it comes to India, I also have to add irrigation, because till date, only 45% of our land is under irrigation. And if you look at Maharashtra, it's just something like 18%. So technology as well as irrigation, if we have these two factors, we can go a long way in increasing the productivity of our crops. Then we have to increase productivity. If we increase the productivity, the land can be released for other uses, because land is obviously a very scarce commodity and it can be released for many other uses. Then increased production can also be used for agro-processing, and such units can be established in rural areas today, which will help to reduce distress migration and create employment. Like today we're talking that the labor force has gone back to the hinterland, and whether they would come back or no. But it's also an opportunity to start some agro-processing units, other non-farm employment creation, so that these farmers could get employment or these laborers could get employment, and therefore this would help to revive the rural economy. Then another challenge facing us is the export of agricultural produce, which is often subject to non-tariff barriers. As we have the sanitary and phytosanitary measures. When it came to globalization, we could only talk about tariffs being a barrier to trade. But with respect to agriculture, we have non-tariff barriers because the developed countries have imposed many stringent quality norms. These norms are likely to become more and more challenging in the post-COVID-19 scenario, and the country must therefore be prepared to meet these norms. Then finally, we come to the government intervention. It's not that the government has not done anything for the agricultural sector. I mean, before COVID-19 also, the agricultural sector has always been showing low growth rates. We talk about farmers suicide, we talk about distress in the agricultural sector, and the government is keeping the agricultural sector as a priority sector. The agricultural sector in India has something like 14.5 crore farmers and an equal number of agricultural laborers. So the government in this situation, not only in the COVID-19 situation, but all along is trying to support the sector through various measures. We have three types of support given by the government. One is the income support, the credit support, and the agri reforms. So what has been the income support? The direct cash transfer under PM Kisan. We know in our last year's budget, the government had announced a 6,000 rupees to be transferred to the bank account of all the farmers, of about 14 crore farmers, the small and marginal ones, that is 80% of 14 crore farmers at least, getting 6,000 income support. Hello. Then we have the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which further provided support to the vulnerable section. So what was the features of this scheme? It again gave income support to many poor farmers, laborers, the widows, and other vulnerable section of society. Then additional food grains. Already food grains is supplied under the public distribution system. But other than that, additional food grains is being given under this Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. Then the government has raised the wages. We know that the Maharashtra Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is a kind of used during emergency situations to create employment. We have this act to create employment so that additional wages can be given to the workers. During lean season, employment can be created, public works can be done, and assets can be created. So this act has been implemented right since 2006, but it's been given this year, the government has raised the wages and given an additional 60,000 crore. So the normal budget for NREGA is something like 40,000 crore. But in this COVID situation, the government has given an extra budget of something like 60,000 crores in order to create additional employment and therefore give money in the hands of people. Now, the income support is obviously very important because today the main problem relating to the COVID situation is demand shock. There is no demand. So when these poor workers, when they get income in their hands, they would obviously create a demand, and then gradually one sector will they've created a demand for one item, that will create a demand for another item, and so the chain would go on and the economy would revive. So therefore, giving income support is very important so that it could create a kind of a demand in the economy. And as you know, today we are facing a big demand shock. So therefore, income support is very important. Then we have been talking about, there has been quite smooth procurement of the Rabi crop. So when COVID was, the lockdown was announced in March, in April, we had to do the harvesting of the wheat crop. The government had at least 15-20 days time to sort of look into the issues. There was a shortage of labor, but then a lot of wheat, mainly grown in Punjab. So they had mechanization to support the harvesting, and the government also has raised the minimum support price, and it has made arrangements for procurement operations. And the Indian Railways have also taken measures to see that the wheat could be transported from and distributed to different states in India. And the one point I'd like to raise here is that I've said about additional food grains. When this lockdown was announced, we already had something like 52 million tons of food grains in our buffer. And plus the Rabi crop the Rabi wheat has been good. And we are also expecting a good food grain production of or something like 280, 290 million tons. But the Rabi wheat was a good harvest, and we also expecting a good Kharif harvest. So we hope that there'll be no shortage of food grains. In fact, I remember seeing on TV that we had so much of excess of food grains that the rice could be used for making alcohol. So we are very comfortable with food grains, and the railways are doing a reasonably good job in trying to ease the supply to and transport it to different states of the country. Now, the next is credit support. First of all, as I already talked to you about horticulture, that how the crops were destroyed and the farmers earned much less income. So obviously they would not be in a position to repay the loan. So immediately the RBI has announced a moratorium for term and crop loans for about 3 months. So they have some breathing space to repay loans. Probably the 3 months could get further extended. Then interest subventions for crop loans. If the farmers repay the crop loans in time, they get some 1%, 2% subvention on interest. And then the NABARD is giving additional support to the farmers in the form of credit, and even more support, something like 2 lakh crores through Kisan Credit Card. So once more, as Dr. Jyoti said, that how are we getting ready for the Kharif crop? We start sowing the Kharif crop around this time. So the government has ensured that the farmers have enough credit to buy all the inputs, fertilizers, seeds, and all inputs are readily available, so they could start their sowing operations. So the government is trying to take care to see that the Kharif crop sowing operations are also not negatively impacted. So then finally, we just come to the agri reforms. Now the agri reforms itself, I think Dr. Deshpande made a mention of it in our introductory talk, that a large number of agri reforms, this agri reforms itself is a webinar by itself, but I'll just skip through it briefly out here. So the first important agri reforms, I already spoke that our infrastructure is weak. It's always been weak, and it was the need was so much during the COVID time that we need to strengthen it. And a package has been announced for strengthening infrastructure, logistics, and capacity building. And a lot of infrastructure would be built at the farm gate itself. The micro food enterprises will be promoted, and 3 ordinances have been expedited due to COVID-19 to provide barrier-free trade and promote One India, One Market. So what were the 3 ordinances? The 3 ordinances was the doing away with the Essential Commodity Act. It has been amended so that major crops, which are the major crops? That is cereals, pulses, potato, onions, and oilseeds. These are free from excessive regulations on stock limits. Now, this Essential Commodity Act, as you can see, it's 1955. So it has outlived its utility. It was fixed in soon in the immediately post-independence period. This Essential Commodity Act was enacted because at that time when India got independence, we had food shortage, we had the Bengal famine, there was a severe, so the food had to be rationed out. So it was not necessary, they did not want food to be hoarded and stocked in excess. There should be proper distribution to all consumers. And hence this Essential Commodity Act was enacted. But it has been going on, it's an archaic law, and it's been going on for law. It has created a lot of issues. I mean, as I mentioned, it's another seminar by itself, so I don't want to go into the details. But like for onions, for example, the price goes up to 90 rupees. And then you have a team going from Delhi to Lasalgaon, which is the biggest onion market in Asia, to find out that traders have really been hoarding the produce or no. And these kind of things keep on happening. Secondly, the traders feel that it's a disincentive for them to invest in warehouses. And today the need of the hour is warehouses. So therefore, it's important to do away with the Essential Commodity Act, except in extreme rare cases. Similar with respect to potatoes, because you know potatoes are a very important crop in West Bengal. And if the price goes up, it's again politically sensitive. So then they will immediately reduce the stocking limits. But the traders have kept the stocks in the hope of making some money in the lean period. And this cannot happen. And it creates a lot of issues and discourages stocking. So therefore, I think it's a welcome move that the Essential Commodity Act has been done away with, unless there is some extreme emergency. Then again, the monopoly of the APMCs has been removed. I mean, this again is a huge topic for discussions. And again, the APMC Acts were enacted post-independence in the 1950s. Each state, actually agriculture is a state subject, but these ordinances have been come by the center because they have used some point in the constitution and come out with these 3 ordinances, which I suppose it's okay. But the APMCs, each state has its own APMCs, and they had, there was always this issue that they maintain near monopsony conditions. There is collusion among the traders, price discovery is not there. And also they were a monopoly because farmers had to sell their produce only in the APMCs. And today, actually, the issue is there that there is we're talking about prices falling and farmers are not getting due produce. So therefore, in order to give them due price for the produce, obviously we need to have good markets, and a monopoly should be removed and there should be more competition in the markets. So therefore, the more and more markets are allowed. With one of the ordinances, there is the barriers to trade are removed. You can do interstate trade. Any market outside the APMC can be called a market. A warehouse can be called a market. And also there are market fees over there. So we have to see that. We hope that there'll be more markets. And even from one state to the other, movement means octroi, and I know so many problems are there. So there's a barrier-free trade, and we hope that the farmers will get better price. They'll be able to sell in the farm gates and get a better price for the produce. And the third ordinance is to facilitate the contract farming. Again, the contract farming is a risk mitigating measure. Just like you have the minimum support price, so they don't allow the price to fall below a particular level, then the government has to step in and buy. Same with contract farming, the farmer can have a contract with his, whoever he does a contract with, and fix the price before. So he's got price, it's a price assurance. So that the government wants to promote contract farming. Whether he would get a better price or no is not sure, because often the market price may be much higher than the price which is fixed by the contract. But main thing is that the farmer is assured of what price he is going to get. Now, talking about contract farming, we had done a study on broilers at poultry farming a number of years ago, and at that time this bird flu was there. And the farmers made huge losses because, again, just like how in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the poultry farms are destroyed due to bird flu, all poultry farms are destroyed and the farmers made huge losses. So they did not want to, they said, although we get much higher prices, we prefer to tie up with Godrej, Venkateshwar hatcheries and other such hatcheries. So we are assured of a price, they do not want to take risk, and therefore they prefer contract farming. So it's one more measure which is being facilitated by the government to ensure that the farmers get a better price for their produce. And then finally, I would say that COVID-19 has given opportunities for agriculture. It will play an important role in the transition of domestic and global agriculture. Digital and internet economy will find new takers, and agriculture sector has the opportunity to run the race. Now, today, if you see, we have about 68 crore people who have in India who have access to internet. So it's expected to go up to something like 90 crores. So as more and more people have access to internet and digital, they'll be able to get the price, they'll be aware of the price, they'll be able to take advantage of electronic trading, and it'll lead to much better price. A unified agricultural market is created which can be accessed online. Electronic trading leads to real price discovery and reduced transaction cost. But then again, talking about electronic trading, it's a major challenge in India. And the big challenge, besides all the internet and other electronic trading platform, the main challenge is with respect to assaying the produce, checking for quality control. Because when a commission agent or a trader buys the produce, he would prefer to feel it, touch it, and see it. And he cannot see it when there's electronic trading. And you know, in our Indian agriculture, the produce is never homogeneous. For example, you take the case of horticulture. Like we keep, you look at our apples, one is green, one is pink, one is red, one is small, one is big. But when we look at the imported apples, like say Washington apples, which we all have seen, they are absolutely homogeneous. Or any of the apples you see in the malls, they are homogeneous. So the buyer knows what he's exactly buying. But in India, the produce, there's so much of difference in the quality of the produce. There's no proper grading. So the buyer is always apprehensive. So this assaying is a major challenge for electronic trading. But when this really happens, it'll help with good price discovery. And secondly, in a COVID-like situation, the issue of social distancing and other such problems would not arise. Then what do we need today? We also need to have agri-tech startups with a technology integrated platform. These are springing up, and this can be a big game changer for the Indian agriculture. Today we are seeing that United States is becoming very stringent in inviting skilled workforce from countries like India. And so this can actually help to prevent brain drain from India. And a large number of our IIT IIMs, they are setting up agri-techs startups. They're starting up with many of these agri-tech startups, and they're doing well. Many of them are children of farmers. They know the issues, they know the problems. They're coming up with technology, providing advisory services, aggregating farmers, and they're contributing a lot to ensure that the farmer gets a better price. And also he's able to be aware of the price, and he also gets some kind of awareness about inputs and advisory services. So we hope that agri-tech startups can also be a game changer for the Indian agriculture. And then again, one issue is about the scale of agro-processing. It should be increased to reduce wastage. It can create lean season demand and generate employment. Like I explained in my presentation that how milk could, because there's no demand for milk due to the lockdown, there's no demand from hotels, tea stalls. So it has been converted into milk powder, and it can be preserved and stored. So that's a big way. Or even the grapes can be converted into raisins, the tomatoes can be converted into tomato purees. And again, going back to our sensitive topic about onions, the price goes up to 90 rupees a kg, and very quickly it comes down even to 3 rupees and 4 rupees in Lassalgaon market. And this has happened within the last 1 year. I'm not talking about long ago stories. So when the price comes down to such a low level, we can have dehydration of onions. And then this issue comes about, will there be a demand? The Indian consumer has to change. And when the prices go up, we have to think of products like dehydrated onions or dehydrated garlic to satisfy the lean season demand. And these are very important. Agro-processing is therefore very important to reduce wastage and even out the supplies throughout the year. And so, I suppose these are the last points I have to make. As things begin to change, Indian agriculture will not only get transformed, but it will serve as a catalyst of growth for other sectors, and then there will be overall growth of the economy. So when Indian agriculture begins to prosper, when the farmers get a better price, they get more money in their hands, obviously they would demand TV and refrigerator and mobile phones and so many commodities. And then the industrial sector would grow, the service sector would grow. So the agricultural sector is as such a catalyst of growth for the overall growth of the economy. Whenever there is a drought, is a bad year, there's overall recession of the economy. But when the agricultural sector grows, there is a lot of potential for other sectors of the economy to grow, and overall economy would grow. So therefore, I think with these words, I have to say that agriculture has a lot of opportunities, and when we make use of the opportunities, and there's aggregation of small and marginal farmers for joint farming, selling their produce together, getting a better price, and also switching over to, we have to try to, rather than keeping on depending upon the government for subsidies, we can have more and more improvement in the agricultural sector. It would definitely take the entire economy to a better growth path. So with these words, I end my presentation. Thank you. What should I do? What is happening?
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, was it audible?
Absolutely.
Oh, great.
Ma'am, Jyoti ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, would you like to share some thoughts, and if you have any queries to ask to ma'am?
Yeah. A couple of queries. Then let's leave it open to. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
Then let's leave it to the large number of people who are here on this platform. When you say that there are losses, would it not vary from district to district?
Yes, of course it would vary. I told it's just a rough estimate. It would vary from farmer to farmer, not only district to district. It was just a rough estimate.
Yeah.
And also it's not grown in every district. Like the crops
correct. Yeah.
So I've just taken the peak places, like strawberries, the western belt, Mahabaleshwar, Panchgani, wherever the peak places where they've grown. As I mentioned, it's a rough estimate. I can't obviously go to the exact, but definitely some.
No. This was just I wanted for my own personal understanding, that because immediately the losses go up into almost 25,000 crores just on horticulture.
No, poultry meat. Yeah, for the poultry, because we saw all the chicken farms were totally destroyed. And this is given by the Poultry Dealers Association. It's a poultry association which is that I have not calculated for poultry. I have done it for horticultural crops. But for poultry, it was given by the Poultry Association, what they estimated February, March, and April.
So obviously, Sangeeta, you have put across your points over there that there are great, challenges and roadblocks make us, compel us to think in a very different manner. And when we think differently, we come up with innovative ways. As you said, there are marketing people who are going through the online marketing, whether it was an Nasik farmers, whether it was various traders, etc. So overall, yes, we've been seeing, I mean, I've been a student of agricultural economics since, 1970s, and almost the same lines repeat to date, that the productivity is much lower, whether it is labor productivity, land productivity, etc. What is, if you were given these 5 wish list changes that you would want to bring into the agricultural sector, what would your wish list begin with and end with? Just 5 of them.
Well, the first thing I would say is that, like I mentioned about technology, but first, and I think that the most important thing in Indian agriculture, or rather, is the watershed. You see, as I mentioned, like you are saying, we've been hearing it since decades, the same story. Now, since decades and decades, we are hearing that in Maharashtra, 18% of our gross cropped area is under irrigation. Only 18%. We have some.
Absolutely, it's not changing.
So why is it not changing? And there are again, if you go into the micro level, like we have done this vision document for Jalna, which is totally drought prone. But in Jalna itself, I have seen a watershed which is very successful. Or next to Pune, our Ralegaon, Siddhi, Anna Hazare, there are some very successful watersheds.
Watershed programs.
Even the government is spending a lot of money on watershed. We had this Indo-German watershed project and so many. So why are there not many more success stories in watershed? And even in the Marathwada region, which is we call the suicide prone area, it does rain suddenly. There are times when it does rain a lot. So why don't they store the water? Why? I mean, there's so even if, the World Bank is putting in a lot of money for watershed. So you're saying 5 wish lists. I think if we have only irrigation, it will be a big game changer. Because activity of crops in Punjab, Maharashtra, it's so high in Punjab. So when you compare the difference, a lot of it is water. I'll give you the example of soybean. When we have a good monsoon, Maharashtra, it's totally rain-fed soybean. When we have a good monsoon, it's something like 1700 kg per hectare. When the monsoon is there, it's 300 kg per hectare. Now look, I even told this to the World Bank, because the difference is 300 kg and 1700 kg. So forget about wish list. Even if we an irrigation when we say 45%, it's only because of Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh. Other states, it's very low. So this itself, when we try to improve our irrigation, that itself would increase our productivity to such a high level. And the other point which I'm trying to say is that, first of all, like I mentioned, that we have very low productivity levels. Now, despite having low productivity levels, still the price is crashing, means we have a supply glut. So therefore, we have to try to, it's an opportunity to reduce our land. If you increase the productivity, reduce our land from agriculture and shift to rural non-farm employment, and we have to improve. It's a holistic approach. We have to try to improve rural non-farm employment, revive the rural sector, create more, and again, there won't be concentration in cities like Bombay and Pune, again, which are high density of population, and again, spreading the virus. So we need to improve our rural sector, not only with respect to agriculture, but everything, literacy. It's a holistic approach. First, I would say is irrigation, then technology. Today, again, we are talking about smart agriculture. It's in such an early phase, though there has a lot to be done. We talk about crop, I mean, because we don't have smart agriculture, we have huge subsidies. We're talking about crop insurance. It cannot be handled properly because nobody knows what is the exact yield. When it's done manually, it can be manipulated. If you have drones and other such technology to give you the exact loss, that would be able to find out how much the farmers have actually lost and accordingly give compensation. So basically, it's I mean, five is a big number. I think irrigation and technology itself would sort out, and then all the logistics and the supply chain, cold storage, warehousing. Then we have to improve upon our sanitary and phytosanitary conditions so that we can export more. I mean, I'm not going into details, but we are the biggest producers of so many fruits and vegetables. We can export more if we have, improve upon our sanitary and phytosanitary conditions, our certification, maintain GAP certification. So there are, on all fronts, we have to improve ourselves. But I would give the top to irrigation and technology, and then the cold chain, the logistics. Then even rural infrastructure has to improve.
Okay, so I'd just like to add over here, another point is that, maybe there is a case of optimization of factor productivity that is required, whether it is labor, land, as you rightly pointed out, more of technology, which goes to any sector that you're really talking about. The next is, of course, we talked about digital technology. And I feel we've not talked about the sustainable agriculture, we are talking about smart, but along with the smart, I think the additional sexy word that is really these days talked about is, sustainable agriculture, and how only when you remove people from there will the incomes really increase, because I think at the moment it's so narrowly spread over a large number of people competing with each other in that kind of a sense. So we've always heard about the strategy of how you need to move people out of agriculture. And you mentioned this point on non-farm approach. Well, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, we've been hearing them right since WTO has come into being, and before that GATT. So it's lovely. I think I'll leave this to Varun to take this forward so that others can ask you what is on their thoughts, and I request some of you who are, your cameras are on and not formally attired, to please shut off your cameras. If you can, Varun, I don't know how the system works, but then if people are not formally attired, you either request them. And over to you, Varun. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Thank you, ma'am. So that was regulation. Now we're trying to...
No, that is perfectly fine, but there are new regime has been created that you register the contract.
As far as the ordinances are concerned, the government has just announced them. There's still, like, even when you have a contract, regarding contract farming, I mean, exactly the nitty-gritty has yet to be worked out. The government has only announced the ordinances. The details exactly have to be worked out. Like with respect to, like we say, one India, one market. They're saying you don't need a license. You just have a PAN card is enough to buy. And you tie up with any exporter, processor, or anybody. So as where they've presented the ordinances, it is as if it is absolutely free. But they've just been announced, so they've not been put into action yet. So it's a bit difficult to announce, but the aim is to deregulate. But let us see how the stage has been set. Yeah. The stage has been set. We have to see how it works. I mean, the issue is that even the Essential Commodity Act, I mean, I think that it is going to be very useful because the traders, I mean, after when you're stocking something, you're stocking it to the purpose to earn some money. You're buying it, you're storing it, you have storage costs, you may have storage losses, you're giving the crop in the lean period, and suddenly within 2 months, the government comes in and says you unload your stocks. It's not fair for the traders. So the government and these issues have arisen a lot with respect to onion and potatoes, sensitive crops. So I think that getting rid of the Essential Commodity Act is in the right direction. And the other two ordinances, still the nitty-gritty has to be worked out. It has to be framed, and let's see how it goes.
I think in the more focus of economists in India is required on how all these new reforms are structured. Because you see the model contract law and the contract farming laws passed by Tamil Nadu and Madhya Pradesh. They have introduced a new bureaucracy to manage those contracts, and that could hurt the private sector. So think about that. This is not but let me congratulate you. All the issues have been very well laid out. Number one, two things you may want to focus on is whether we have institutions to meet this agenda. Because our banking system, our NABARD operations, our food, environmental issues, food safety issues, we require new kind of institutions and very decentralized and local institutions which can help farmers. What do you think about that? Or do you need some rethinking about the kind of institutions we have both in the public sector and private sector to cope with the agricultural transformation agenda which you have put forward, Dr. Shah? And I should stop.
Well, the government did talk about this jam, as they said. You know, they whatever it may be, the government is trying to ensure that all farmers have a bank account. The money is going through. The direct payment is being made. So even they want to claim crop insurance, the money goes straight to the bank account. So at least the farmers are being encouraged to open bank accounts and then seed the bank accounts with do digitization of land records. After all, we have 14.5 crore farmers. So it's,
huge.
So it's not so easy, but the government has made considerable progress in trying to make the land records digitized and make them open bank accounts and direct cash transfer into the account. So all this is a big step. It will take a long time because naturally, I mean, the kind of. But I think we are moving slowly, but hopefully in the right direction.
I know, absolutely. The direction is absolutely right, and you have covered it so well. And thank you so much for your great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and good to see you. I'm happy at least we could meet.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll meet in Pune when COVID situation normalizes.
Yes. Look forward.
Yeah, ma'am, we have next question from Dr. Nitin Ghag. Can you answer Dr. Nitin Ghag from Bombay? Nitin Ghag. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Nitin. Go ahead.
Revolution in agriculture. Do we expect any revolution in now recent time because there is a good opportunity in India?
Yes, of course, we do expect and we hope, at least, even if we don't, because I already talked about the digital economy, and today we have to gradually start using drones in agriculture because that will give you the precise. In fact, when the Prime Minister announced the Pradhan Mantri crop insurance scheme, he said it should be linked to technology, and we have to use. I mean, we have to move into a new agriculture revolution. We cannot. It would happen. It may take time, but then suddenly the speed would grow. Like when we talk about mobile phones, like in early 2000, there was just 1% of India's population which had access to internet. Today, we have almost 60% of the population. So suddenly the growth rate is very high. And with more and more access to mobile and usage of drones, and as I mentioned, agri-tech startups, there will be a revolution. Aggregators, use of sensors, software, it would happen. It will take time, but I'm sure it would happen. And
so next revolution means be technological revolution, you are saying?
Also, and I'm sure that IITs all would contribute in a big way because the opportunity in the United States and other countries may be now limited. And I hope they would.
Thank you, madam.
I have one quick point, Dr. Shah. Can I say?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes.
Now I was wondering, this crop insurance
yes.
And MSP, MSP covers only about 6 to 10% of farmers. It is not really reaching everyone. And sometimes the MSP creates a kind of ceiling on the prices rather than, so the price discovery is in fact affected adversely because of MSP. Yeah, that is all. And farmers can benefit with higher prices than what MSPs are there. So I was just thinking that instead of MSP, India should go for price insurance. You see, the US has been trying this idea of insuring price. That is, you insure revenue accruing to farmers and not cost of production of the crop which is currently. So we are not really insuring farmers' income. We are only insuring him to protect his cost of production through crop insurance, and which is also reaching only 1/3 of the farming community. So question is, I'm just raising this question for your further research and consideration, whether there is a case to introduce price insurance for crops or farmers, for farming system, whole price insurance. US has done that. US has introduced that, and there are private insurers who do. Of course, there are government subsidies involved, but that has changed the whole character of insurance for agriculture. Thank you. Just wanted to bring to your attention.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'll take the next question. Dr. Brijesh from IEG. I think he just left. Is Dr. Brijesh there? I don't see him, ma'am. I'll put forth this question. He talks about MSP only. He said in the coming times, what do you expect about crops which have MSP, the prices of crops which have MSP, and prices of crop which do not have MSP? Like, do you see that the crops which have MSP will be at the higher level, or the prices of crops which are not MSP will fall? What do you think?
See, first of all, the issue that it is true that MSP does lead to distortion of prices, because it's an administered price. Okay, like the government is giving high MSP for rice, like rice and wheat. A lot of it is procured. Yeah. So the Punjab farmers are keeping on growing rice and wheat because they know they have an assured market is procured at MSP for public distribution system, and that's creating its own problems about, as Dr. Jyoti mentioned, sustainable agriculture causing all soil salinity and whatever. It's like a distortion in the cropping pattern to some extent, a high MSP because it's administered, and it's 23 to 24 crops have MSP. Almost all crops are having MSP. What doesn't have MSP, what Dr. Brijesh may be hinting at, is maybe horticultural crops. Now they have market intervention system. So that is not on a continuous basis. When there is a crisis with a particular horticultural crop, like say onion, then the government introduces a price and it is purchased. Or like Himachal Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh, sorry, they have what is called deficiency payment. So if the market price is 8 rupees, the government may fix a price, a market intervention price of 10 rupees. So 2 rupees is given to each farmer per kg, and 8 rupees in the market. So deficiency payment. So I think almost all crops are having MSP. At least 24 commodities are having MSP, and what is not having MSP is mainly horticultural crops, not the cereals, pulses.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
If we keep on increasing our MSP, as like, you know, it's again a lobby, then it would be an administered price. Where is the price discovery? So that is why probably the government is introducing market reform, so that there's more and more competition. The farmers get price, a market price is there. I mean, you know, finally an MSP is an administered price, and it can lead to a distortion in cropping pattern, which is actually happening in Punjab and spoiling the soil. Because if you fix a high MSP, or it happened to pulse, whatever, if you look at this year's, look at the minimum support prices this year. Now the government of India, what they have done is that they've changed the name of Jawar and Bajra to Nutri cereals. We used to call them coast cereals. Now we call them Nutri cereals because they have high nutrition value. And the government feels that it is good for health. So they have increased, you look at the MSP for all these sorghum, Bajra and all, it's very high, the price. So the farmers have diverted the cropping pattern to that because the government wants to promote it. So if the government wants to promote a particular crop, it would increase the MSP. But then it should not go to such an extent, like in case of wheat and rice, where there is excess production of the crop and it's causing a soil salinity.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments on the agricultural price policy. Dr. Shabni, ma'am, Dr. Shabni Mukherjee, ma'am, would you like to ask a question? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Varun. I have one question, ma'am, regarding the doubling farmers' income. We had already our target for this doubling farmers' income by 2022. Now, given the situation of outbreak of COVID-19, I think we need to even think even in deeper sense what would be the more strategic intervention from the state governments. You are right that agriculture is basically a state subject, and even it is true that when it comes towards the input management and factor productivity, it is more that we realize the role of state. So now I think for given this situation, and on top of that we cannot avoid natural calamities as well, and farmers do not have, let's accept that farmers do not have cope-up strategies as well, and they don't have precautionary savings, and as well as I felt like that they need much more government support for the in terms of price security that Dr. Deshpande also also commented on. So do you feel that doubling farmers' income needs to be revised with more specific, region specific targets and with proper strategies given the situation?
See, my opinion about doubling farmers' income, I mean, I think it's more of just a catchword that, I mean, the purpose, to take it in the true sense of the term, although they've given a base here and double, I mean, there are so many issues involved about prices, how much the prices would go. Just doubling farmers' income doesn't, after all, every farmer earns a different income. It's not that all there's every farmer earns the same income. So, I think it's more of a way to show, I mean, that it's more of a catchword to show that there is a crisis in the agricultural sector and we must do something more to improve the condition of the farmers and those in the agricultural sector. It's more literally doubling farmers' income really, it's difficult to define like what is the farmer's income, because as I said, we have 14.5 crore farmers. Every farmer has a different income, and we don't know what is going to happen in 22. What is
sure.
So the issue should be more macro, that we have to try to improve the agricultural sector per se, and it is a holistic approach. It is not only like as we said already till today, we say 42% of our workforce is in the agricultural sector. Now, obviously, a lot of it is disguised unemployment. So we have to try to create other job opportunities. So we have to try to promote growth in the rural sector, like as I mentioned, agro industries, rural non-farm, even good schools, good roads. So other infrastructure, more phones, so that
access to water is,
So we have to try to revive the rural economy as such. So there'll be no distress migration, and there will be no high density of population in the cities, and even the rural sectors can sort of improve. The condition the rural sector can improve, and then the overall economy can be revived. So I think it's more of a holistic approach in improving the rural sector, improving all the facilities rather than just saying doubling farmers' income.
Sorry, ma'am, I have a small one query regarding the technological improvement. So as we have actually, I have seen in our papers, I have done one paper taking rates data from NCAER, where we found that farmers have technological lock-in. Basically, Indian agriculture has huge technological lock-in because of this risk factor. They don't have precautionary measure of and cope-up strategies. So they fall into that kind of category. They don't adopt the technology very easily. They go by their learning by doing factors, because that is where they can at least get some amount of money in return of whatever they have invested. So in this rigid section, because agriculture is very rigid, and for adopting technology, what kind of technology you think that would be preferred even in this more rigid situation in agriculture under this COVID-19 case?
See, I mean, the issues, I mean, COVID-19 is a phenomenon which has just come now. I mean, technology we do need because there is labor shortage, you see. So obviously, how do you like in Rabi harvesting the wheat harvesting was due in April in Punjab. There was shortage of labor. So we had to do mechanization. As you said, the farmers are resource poor. They cannot invest in capital intensive. So what is important is custom hiring. We need to have custom hiring so the farmers can hire the the harvesters or whatever, and then they can manage to do it. And subsidies are given, but see, it's all very diverse. There are some parts of India which may be technologically very advanced, but the overall picture is that in some parts there's still subsistence agriculture. But it is capital intensive, so the government has to again give, depending on what it wants to give, incentive through subsidies and for mechanization, custom hiring. But it has to gradually start. So, I mean, wherever
we have to start.
And mechanization itself there's again a debate between excess surplus labor and mechanization. But mechanization itself will create employment because it increases cropping intensity. You can take 3 crops, and then so again more labor is needed. And that's how soybean and all began to get introduced, with their short duration crops. So you can harvest, you can do timeliness of operations. Then again, service sector will grow grow, industry will grow because you're producing mechanical
Yeah,
equipment.
it will definitely generate demand, and it will obviously drive the economy little ahead.
There are, I mean, you know, it all depends on the entrepreneur skills, the government subsidies, but there are a lot of opportunities. How one to take, like we gave the success story of even the FPCs, that Sayadri farms. There are many failures as well. So, I mean, if good leadership, it would help to give a solution. And then they have full, absolutely all cold storage, pre-cooling, grading, packing, all facilities are available. So if you have good leadership, good investment, good infrastructure, things would work.
Yeah, we can start thinking of at least. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, thank you, Shabni ma'am. Ma'am, we'll have last question now. This is the last question from our student, Adya, who's a final year student. Adya, please go ahead with your question. Unmute yourself. Adya, please unmute yourself and ask the question. Adya? Adya, please unmute yourself. I think she's unable to mute. I don't know why, but okay, you type your question. Quickly type in your question so that we will, I will speak to ma'am and share the question. It's a very broad question which she has. It is about, I think, tackling on food security. Locust attack. So she mentioned that recently many states came under this ambit of locust attack, especially the northern Indian states like Rajasthan, MP, UP, those states, and there was a locust attack. So do you think, given the current situation, do you think it is going to have an impact, or was it during the lean season and so we may not have an impact on this because of locust attack?
I don't think so. There would be much impact because it was discussed for just a few days' time and it was tackled. So I don't think one should look into the locust attack, but I don't think it would really impact, because at least as far as food grains are concerned, we've done very well in this current wheat crop, and we already had excess of 52 million tons of food grains. So I don't think it's going to, as of now, the food condition is very secure. And as I mentioned, we are even thinking of making alcohol from rice. So I don't think there's going to be any impact on the food security as far as the locust attack is concerned.
Okay, ma'am, we're just nearing 4:30. So I think I'm sorry, I'm not taking any further questions. I would just like to propose vote of thanks. So firstly, Dr. Sangeeta Shroff, we're really thankful for you for sparing the time and coming up with a comprehensive overview on the agriculture side. So let me tell you, ma'am, even I have been reading newspapers, but some of the new points which you talked about, whether it was digital technology and the opportunity, which has not been covered in press. So your presentation brought forth new points for us to think about. And maybe some of our students will take some cues and we will contact you back for some guidance if they plan to take further dissertations or research papers. And I thank all the audiences that Dr. Ramesh sir, Dr. Brajesh, who was there, Dr. Om Prakash, and many agricultural economists. I think it was one of the heartening part to see many agricultural economists joining in from various parts of India. So we had Nitin, my friend, actually from Bombay University also. He's done PhD under Dr. Sriraman sir in air transport. So we had many diverse audience, right from students to researchers. So I'm very happy. And Dr. Sangeeta ma'am, my apologies that in the beginning I did not introduce you. So please, I'm so sorry, ma'am. In a hurry, I just forgot. Yeah. So I thank you all, and if anyone would like to get connected to Sangeeta ma'am, I will share her email ID. And thank you very much, one and all, for joining in the presentation.
Yeah. So
thank you. Ma'am, would you like to say something?
No, I'm really happy that Dr. Deshpande I could see him out here, because we normally meet once a year, but this time it was not possible. And many who came, Dr. Ranade and others. And I'm really happy that this happened. I thank you for organizing it, and we had good interaction. And I enjoyed, look forward for more interactions. Thank you.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
And
thank you very much.
Voices School of Economics for giving me this opportunity. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you once again, all the participants, for joining in. Yeah, ma'am. Yes, Ramesh sir.